Welcome to Great Loop Radio, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today we're continuing our series on how we found our Great Loop boat, and I'm very pleased to have David and Debra Allen with me. They're going to share the story of how they found the right boat for their Great Loop, and as you know, if you've been following along, that everybody's perfect Great Loop boat is different, so there's no one answer, but the Allens will share the details of their boat and how they went about that search. And we started this series in 2021 because we knew one of the biggest challenges right now is finding a boat for the loop. So we're bringing these stories to you in hopes that it inspires some of you and gives some of you some ideas on how you might go about this task right now in a very challenging market for the buyer. So before I officially bring in the Allens, I want to take a moment to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Curtis Stokes and Associates, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. So David and Debra Allen, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Great to be here.
Thank you, Kim. We're happy to be here.
Yep, and you're kind of making us all a little envious because we see that you're coming to us from aboard your boat there in a marina. So tell us a little bit about your story, but where you are now, and also fill us in a little bit on whatever boating background you've had in the past.
Well, we're sitting on our boat, Cersei, in Little River, South Carolina, which is our home port. Our boating background, mine goes back to being a kid. I grew up, and boated with friends and family out Blackwater, creeks and rivers of South Carolina. And I get grown and I bought my first boat. Once you get out of school, got a little money, so I bought my first boat, which is it was I call it the starter boat, a 15-foot speedboat. And we've sort of progressed up, probably for the last. She married me, and she kind of like married into my addiction.
I had never voted on David.
And we have been doing express cruisers, probably for the last 25 or 30 years. Traveling with our boating club. We're big America's Boating Club Power Squadron members. So we've done a lot of trailer boating and those kinds of things. Our boat prior to this was a 27-foot express cruiser, and we've cruised everywhere. I have cruised everywhere from New York to Key West on the East Coast, up and down the ICW.
And we've chartered a boat in the Pacific Northwest as well.
Most of it's been in the Carolinas, North Florida, those kinds of areas. Easy striking distance from South Carolina.
Yeah, well, so that's lots of experience. So probably made it somewhat easier to decide what kind of boat you were looking for, especially since you had some boats before. But let's not leave everybody in suspense. Tell everyone what kind of boat Cersei is, and then we'll talk a little bit about what made you choose Cersei.
Cersei's a Carver 430 Cockpit Motor Yacht. When we were looking, we hit the search. We've got experience with friends that had larger boats or large boats. I call anything that, to me, the deciding point between a big boat is go from trailer boat to not so trailer boats. That's my mark in my head. But we had friends that had large boats, trawlers, and we'd travel with them some. And so we're somewhat familiar with that sort of class of boats. But we're not sailors, so that was just sort of that eliminated one whole class of boats for looking at. But we just launched into the hunt.
We really were looking at trawlers as well as express cruisers, more of a motor yacht. So we started the search looking for a wide variety. Really fell in love with that Power Cat that we had in the Pacific Northwest, but we quickly ruled that was out of our price range and the size we wanted. We spent a number of years looking on the internet, and really, I guess it was spent about 3 years seriously looking, going to boat shows, going to trawler fest, actually visiting boats for sale up and down the coast from really Virginia to Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And we what sort of pruned it down. We hadn't like given up on the concept of trawlers, but you can make a 20-knot boat go 8. You can't make an 8-knot boat go 20. And there are occasions when you need to do that. We have been caught in weather situations where we were able to outrun weather or make a bridge opening. And you can trawl along in a boat, or if you have to, you can kick it up and run. And that tipped the scales, not completely, but that was sort of toward the end of the search, guiding the directions that we were looking.
Yeah. So before we jump into what features were important to you besides the speed, tell us where you got the name Circe for your boat.
Well, we started probably like most people. We had a list that was 2 pages long, and we couldn't reconcile a difference of opinion on what the name of the boat should be. I come from a long line of thinking every boat has its own personality and deserves its own name.
And it speaks to you. The name has to speak to you.
So David probably through the years would have had the same name. He probably named everything Caribbean Soul 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through the years. Uh-huh. But ultimately, David is of Scottish heritage, and it just really dawned on me. I didn't really think about the way we came into the boat initially, but my grandparents were in the military, and every time they would return home, they always brought me what grandmother called a Circe. It was just a thoughtful little gift. Sometimes, it wasn't much. It was just something from their trip. And I proposed that to David once I looked at the history of the name. It's verbal, it's Celtic, and he really liked that. It's very particular to North and South Carolina only, and parts of Pennsylvania where settlers from North and South Carolina traveled. So he was really struck by that, and we finally agreed on something.
and it's spelled Surcee. A lot of people tend to confuse it with the Greek goddess Circe. It's spelled with a C. This is unique to where we're from, to my roots, to some of her roots, and there you go. There was the answer right there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that intrigued me. Being in Charleston, Circe is, I wouldn't even say it's a common word here, but a little bit more common since we are in South Carolina. Yes. And I think I first came across it from a cookie company here that, suggested this, that their cookies were a great Circe. And I thought, what is that? And did some more research and found out more about it. So when I came across that as your boat name, I thought, how interesting. I wonder why. So yeah, I love the name. It suits you, obviously, and it suits your boat. So Circe is a Carver 430 cockpit motor yacht. And as you went about, kind of the search, and it sounds like you started with a pretty wide scope since you looked at trawlers and motor yachts and even had found a Power Cat that you were excited about. Aside from the style of boat or, the classification, what were some of the features that you wanted?
Really, Kim, the thing that we wanted something that was diesel. We wanted something that 2 people could handle. And I really wanted a master berth that you could walk around. Mm-hmm. I was tired of climbing over David all the time on our express cruisers.
And I think a lot of people don't realize actually the importance of that until they've actually had to do it. Exactly. So when you're first boat shopping, and if it's your first bigger boat that it really even has sleeping quarters, you may not really, contemplate that only having one side of the bed to get in and out can be a little bit challenging when somebody's always climbing over. So, yes, that's a great feature. And I'm glad you pointed that out because, like I said, sometimes you don't realize that until you're in that circumstance. So go ahead. Yeah, continue.
But really, that was the basic. I mean, if you start looking at, it was really more of the what would you likes And that was often, then we discovered, regulated by the price we didn't want or we weren't willing to pay. But we also thought it would be wonderful to have, bow thrusters. That was another thing we looked at, to have as much as possible to have the electronics up to date. Those are some of the things that we thought about. But really, mostly we were looking for something that we could handle just the two of us. And we both have our 50-ton captain's license. So we have a little bit of game. And I guess the thing that bothered me the most is we were looking at boats, and I would think we looked at everything from maybe 36 to 45 feet in length. All the different boats we looked at during this time frame. And I got frustrated in terms of we were either, the broker was either showing us boats that I thought were too old because I didn't want to spend a lot of time, doing a lot of refitting and work on an older boat, but yet I could not afford a brand new boat. So I was hunting for that optimum. And that to me was the most frustrating part of the search. Is just, finding what you were looking for within a proper price range where it fit your size that you needed.
Well, and I know you've had Cersei for about 3 years, so that process has become even more challenging. But, you mentioned that you searched for about 3 years, I think is what you had said, which is a pretty long time. So was that, 3 years of really nitty gritty active searching, looking at listings and getting on boats potentially because that might be the one, or was early in the process just a little bit more fact finding? At what point did you really start working with a broker and actually looking for boats that you might be interested in putting an offer in?
Probably
a year.
Yeah.
We worked with a broker for a year.
Yeah, for right at a year, getting boots on the ground or deck shoes on the boat. The other than that, I was at the time we started all this like semi-retired. Deborah was still working, and I was in a position where I could pretty much wind up my career and take off. She was a little bit more bound to that, but we weren't in any real hurry initially, but then you start realizing, okay, time's up. We need to start getting a little more focused. So we've, kicked up the search to get really quite serious about it.
Yeah. So as someone who had owned boats, as an experienced boater, at what point in the process did you decide to use a buyer's broker, and why did you go in that direction?
Well, a buyer's, and we have got friends, as I said, who have purchased large boats, and they've used brokers, and a couple of them are pretty frugal in nature. So that's telling to me right there. And
really, if anything, we were more confident that they would be able to find a larger variety of boats than we had been able to find ourselves. And something that, once we described what we were wanting, that they could be out there looking all of the time while we still had other commitments we had to deal with.
Right.
So I guess ultimately we were hoping to really focus our search and become a little more streamlined in the effort.
Right. Find if a broker has the ability to line up 3 or 4 or 5 boats for you to see in a trip that is really difficult for somebody, a private individual to do. I mean, we had one weekend where we started in Little River. If you know the coast of South Carolina, started in Little River, which is right on the North Carolina, South Carolina state line, looked at 3 or 4 boats around here, got in the car, rode, 150 miles south to Charleston, looked at 2 or 3 there, down to Hilton Head, another 100 miles to the south, and then scheduled several others on the way back. And you can see an awful lot of stuff, and you can qualify and disqualify a lot of vessels like that. And the advantage that the broker had for us was that he was able to do that to a large extent. We found our broker by sheer serendipity, is kind of like the guiding word for this entire process. I have a
Mhm.
high school friend who owned a brokerage, so I just contacted them, and there was no massive search process involved. It was just,
Yeah.
yeah, I knew a guy. You know?
Mhm. So, how did it come about that you actually located the Carver 430 that you ended up buying?
Accidental.
Accidental serendipity.
Mhm.
As I mentioned, we're both power squadron people, and I was at a regional meeting and plopped down next to a friend of mine I'd known for 25 years, and we struck up the conversation, and we're a boating group, right? So we immediately go to boats and what's going on and what you got planned. And I told him that, well, Deb's closing in on retirement. We're going to take off and do the loop. Well, have you got a boat? No, not yet. We're looking pretty hard. We need to talk. And again, by chance, the boat was docked about 5 miles from where we were sitting at that meeting. And he gave me the key, said, go take a look, go take a look around, and let me know what you think.
So really, it was actually 4 years today ago that David brought me to look at the boat. Because while it's, at 43 feet, it was really on the edge probably of what we thought we could handle, particularly when you add another 5 feet with the dinghy lift that it has with it. But more than anything, it has a lot of steps. I was looking for something ultimately at that point that was more maybe one level in living area. And this has a lot of up and down, which is not uncommon. But it's, I really question if it was the right boat. Once we look at it and I saw how much was involved. The only really good thing I liked is very easy to get from the front, from the bow to the stern. And I really liked that cockpit in the stern that allowed me to get closer to the water. I really had not liked the pure aft cabin vessels that we had looked at.
Right.
But we hummed and hawed about it, and then my friend made me the offer I could not refuse. It was an offer I could not refuse. And as by making a long story quite short, he and his wife had bought the boat and they were to do the loop, and she passed away unexpectedly. And he remarried, and family, age, and health suddenly got in the way. And he wanted to pass the baton, as it were, the boat own. And he knew we would, because we knew each other. Yeah. Deb and I would take off, we would do the loop, and he said, and there's a condition to all of this, and that is you've got to come back and you've got to tell me the stories of what all you did. Interestingly enough, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had brunch with him, and the first thing he asked was, have y'all taken off for the loop yet? And I said, no, but we're shooting for April. We're shooting for April right now.
So instead, we got to tell him about the trip we recently took to Ocracoke.
Oh, that's along the loop anyway. But no, that's a really neat story. And
the nice thing is being able to do short trips and get accustomed to the boat. And while I'm getting accustomed to provisioning for more than a few days trip at a time, David's getting accustomed to docking this behemoth.
And also, the boat is in 1995, and I had a bunch of confidence in the boat because I knew the previous owner. I knew him well. So anytime you buy something, you always wonder, how did the other guy handle this? And I knew him, and he was incredibly ethical about things. He and I went out one day and just did a quick and dirty sea trial. Just went out and ran it around before I got a surveyor involved. And, and all was right with the world. Well, 2 weeks later, when Deb came back, we discovered a big old fuel leak in the engine compartment. And I called him, and I discovered what the source of it was. It was mine. It was a cracked fuel line. But he said, "Don't worry about it. I'll get my guy down there and we'll get it taken care of." And bang, in a week it was fixed. The bilge was cleaned out. So you're dealing with a guy that has an incredible amount of integrity. So it makes you feel good about everything that's involved.
Yeah.
It's an older boat, so it's gonna have its idiosyncrasies, and there are gonna be things that are break. But
well, that's David's long way of saying, well, it's a 1995 and he's very comfortable with the boat's integrity and the engine's integrity. We just had all new Garmin electronics put in. So we've spent the past 3 years with the boat learning to run it and upgrading some of the systems that had aged.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's take a quick break and play a message from a sponsor. Then we'll come back. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the upgrades that you have done and some of the things that maybe you had to compromise on when you selected this boat. We know one of them was the lots of steps, but we'll play the message from the sponsor and we'll come back in a moment.
This is the United States Coast Guard, Section San Francisco. Roger.
At Twin Rivers Marine Insurance, our customers' personal insurance needs are first and foremost. I'm Gary Clausen. Our goal here at Twin Rivers Marine Insurance is to instill a sense of reliability, trust, and confidence in our clients. As marine insurance specialists, we have the ability to shop the market and offer the most comprehensive policy for the most competitive price. Our customer service and attention to detail is second to none. Visit us at boatinsuranceonly.com.
We're back on Great Loop Radio. My guests today are Debra and David Allen. They are the owners of Circe. She is a Carver 43, correct? Yeah, 430 Cockpit Motor Yacht. And we're just chatting about how they found and purchased their boat. One of the things that you said in your kind of pre-interview was that the perfect boat is a unicorn. And I loved that because I think that is very true. Every boat purchase is a compromise. And we talked a little bit about some of the features you wanted to have. Debra mentioned that she's not so thrilled about all the steps in this boat. So it's always a trade-off. But, ultimately, what compromises did you make? Were there other things that you had to give up in favor of this boat when you got the offer that you could not refuse? You mentioned bow thrusters was on the list. I don't think this boat has them, if I'm not mistaken. So talk about those compromises and where you ended up.
Well, like I said, bow thrusters is one of them. Because I was taking a quantum leap for me in size from 27 to 43 feet, I had concerns about my ability to be able to handle this much boat. On the other hand, that had never been, that was on the wish list. It forces you to bring your A game every time you pull into a dock when you don't have. On the other hand, it's got twin engines, so you've got a lot of help, with that. So that was one of the sort of the key compromises.
And to some extent, we did not have a lot of hard and fast aspects. I would have liked more of a one level living. So we had to compromise that was not the case. But I did get my galley down. I was not interested in a galley up. I preferred the separation. And it gave us a wonderful, really dinette area in the galley, which is an area where we can continue to do some work, that type of thing. So really, I don't have a full walk around bed. The bed's about 3/4 of a walk around the way the master cabin is on this boat. But we still have 2 separate cabins and 2 separate heads. So that was terrific. Really, of course, the electronics were not new, so we've just replaced all of our electronics and radar. But for the most part, we're extremely fortunate. There will probably be additional upgrades that we might want to make. I would, but a lot of those are cosmetic. I'd love to rip out the carpet in the boat and put down some new flooring and get a new sofa. But right now the new electronics, and we just got a new anchor that we're halfway finished installing, but the rain delayed that finishing that job today. Really, there were not a lot of compromises that we had to make when you realize it's diesel. We can both handle it. That's proven. We don't really need the bow thrusters. That truly was just a nice add-on we would have received. So I think just through the search and being honest with each other about what we liked and we didn't like, the one thing that we don't have that I really would have loved to have had, but it was a wish list item, was better access to the engine compartment. I didn't want to have to lift the floor in the salon area every time we had to check everything before leaving. And to me, that was the biggest compromise. But I wasn't willing to pay what it would have cost with the boat we found that I did like, that did provide you, cockpit access to the engine room.
Yep. Yeah, those are the trade-offs that sometimes become pretty easy when you see the costs associated with them.
That's exactly right. I mean, I can climb that engine. I can lift that carpet an awful lot for, six-figure difference. I can compromise. Yeah, I can. That's a compromise. That's a livable compromise.
Yeah. One of the things that this isn't really a question, it's more of a comment, but one of the things I've really enjoyed about hearing your story is that when we do talk to experienced boaters, that really shows through in their caution, so to speak. I think experienced boaters know a little bit more they know what they don't know. So it's very interesting, you being a lifelong boater and hearing you say that you were worried about being able to handle this big boat because your last one was 27 feet. We have newer boaters who don't think about that because they know they can get some training. So it's just really interesting to hear your approach, especially you both being captains, that the upgrade things were more like the anchor and the electronics, and you're kind of waiting on the carpet, and you've taken your time getting used to the boat. So talk to us a little bit about that mindset, because I think there's a lot of people that would go, oh, well, David's been boating his whole life and he had a 27-foot boat and they're both captains. So why would they have any concerns about a 43-foot motor yacht? But there are legitimate concerns. So, from your experiences, tell us about that.
Well, we both teach boating safety. And the one thing that we always kind of kick off our class with is that, thank you for being here. You're smart enough to realize you don't know everything. The most dangerous guy out there is the guy who says, I've been boating all my life and I know it all. And he's going to be the guy that Cito is going to be dragging in, or he's going to end up on the news somehow. So boating it's a constant ongoing learning process. And a lot of it has to do with, you've got, and the boat search in particular is about you finding kind of your own way. Some people, Debra's mentioned to a galley down arrangement. If you want a galley down, we have friends that you couldn't give them a mega yacht with a galley down. I mean, that's, that is their deal breaker. So we're lucky in that we've made enough mistakes so far, and we've made compromises with other boats that we can overcome with this one, or we know that what might be a deal crusher of an issue, like a lack of a bow thruster. I can't buy a 43-foot boat unless I've got a bow thruster and stern thruster. Yes, you can. You may have to spool it up. You may have to, to get some training. There's plenty of, good places where you can get, training, book learning, hands-on stuff, depending upon whatever, fits for you. And like I said, we've had the boat now, we ease into it. We take off and you do short little trips and, and try not to scream at each other too loudly when we're docking the boat or handling lines. And and we've been at that long enough. And I think this is something that's very true for new boaters. And it's a running joke in the boating community. It's very true. You're going to yell at your spouse. You just don't take it personally. You just I'm not mad at you. I'm mad that things are happening. And we know enough to know that that's going to happen. And you sit down afterwards and say, sorry, honey, that's all right.
I think that's really great advice for people who are early in the boat search and haven't really stopped to consider what experience they have as they're looking for that boat. And the insurance companies are kind of taking care of that on their own a little bit by limiting what they'll let people upgrade to. But you mentioned that, you teach boating safety. I know you're very active members of the America's Boating Club. So as we wrap up, if you would want to go ahead and put in a plug for them, because it is a nationwide group, so people can find those classes everywhere. But what's a good place for want-to-be loopers to start with that education process?
Well, like I said, we're both United States Power Squadrons members of America's Boating Club, and that is a good place to start. We offer a lot of we offer some on the water stuff and a lot of classroom work as well. So you can learn it and then get out on the water and figure it out. And you take it from a book to, okay, now I know what that marker over there means, and it makes sense. So you can Google America's Boating Club or the United States Power Squadron. We're out there. There are roughly 400 local units all over the country, and in the Caribbean as well. It's a great place to learn stuff, meet people that have a similar interest, and they are. I'm a true believer in the group, and they're the folks that I deal with are my best friends. Particularly an incredible body of knowledge when it comes to anything. I mean, I have a list. Be standing on your head in the engine compartment working on something, and I say, okay, I need to call Tony on this, or Carl on that, or Charlie on this. And you've got a guy who has done it, knows it, understands it, and can help you walk through an issue. That's the personal level, and then the organizational level, of course, is that you're part of something, a bigger group, and you can go from port to port and maybe find local units and meet up with them if you can't find your looper friends. So that's my my little elevator speech on it, and that's how I found this boat by sitting down next to a guy in a meeting and striking up a conversation.
Yeah. It's a great organization. It's a great place to start, that boating education, and it goes up to advanced levels in the courses as well. But as David described, it's a lot like the looper community, but on a more localized basis. Yeah. So kind of before you start on the loop and make all those great looping friends, this is your tribe before that. So definitely something we encourage you to look into. David and Debra Allen, owners of Cersei, thank you for joining me today. It's been wonderful to hear from you and learn a little bit more about how you found your boat. We appreciate you.
All right. Thank
you so much, Kim.
Thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. And to everyone who is listening and watching today, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week with another episode of Great Loop Radio. Until then, safe cruising.